Is he a what?
I'm transgender.
So you a boy?
No.
You a girl?
No.
So you nothing?
Yeah.
So you a crackhead?
Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Millennial Smark, and I'm bringing you the slop, the whole slop, and nothing but the slop. Links are down in the description box below. But really quick, just to preface this, I'm not trying to say that Bryan Danielson has to live his life, or he has to be happy or sad or mad based off of what other people are saying, especially in wrestling. You know, he has his own opinions, obviously, and no matter what I say, it's his lived experience. That's how that man wants to live his life, and that's perfectly fine. Doesn't mean that I can't judge it, but understand that this is not me framing it as him being ungrateful or any of that kind of stuff. I just feel like there's an underlining agenda amidst all of this. All right, so I'm going to read this first one for you, this little excerpt that has gotten everybody all up in arms, and then we'll go down the rabbit hole so we can get a little bit more context, and I'll give my opinion afterwards. Bryan Danielson speaks on the differences and how he looks at main eventing AEW All In London versus WWE WrestleMania 30. This is what Bryan Danielson said. What meant the most to me about that match at All In was my family being there. My kids got to see me wrestle. My daughter was old enough to be able to remember it for the rest of her life. The idea of, now I'm just essentially a dad. My daughter will remember this thing of 50,000 people at Wembley Stadium where her dad was cool. I main event at WrestleMania 30 with WWE, and honestly, it doesn't mean that much to me. My sister and my niece got to come into the ring, but I was about to marry my wife the following Friday, and they wouldn't let her come down to the ring. They didn't want her to be in the thing. And on top of that, it wasn't just that. It was like I was going through a ton of neck pain and all these other things. So these things that seem like cool moments to a viewer, there's all this other stuff going on in a wrestler's life or a performer's life that could make that moment not as valuable to them as it is to the viewing people, or as it is to the people viewing it. Which, like I said, that's that man's lived experience. He gets to say whatever he wants to say. Now, I will say this whole passage, and I'm going to get a little bit more deeper into it as far as what I feel is the underlying agenda behind all this. This passage is one of the only ones where I will not completely blame Bryan Danielson or judge him based off of how he feels. I don't see anything wrong with what he's saying. It's not him necessarily. It's the double standard of the AEW people. See, this is something else that I want to be able to structure before I go a little bit deeper into this, is having the AEW fanboys come at people in the comment section. Now, don't get it twisted. If it's WWE fanboys, which most likely it happens to be the case, it's weird. It's weird behavior to essentially say that Bryan Danielson is ungrateful because of how he personally lived his experience, okay? He said that he liked All In more because his daughter got the opportunity to be there. His family got the opportunity to be there. His actual immediate family that he created happened to be there versus WrestleMania. I see this one comment who says, no disrespect to Bryan, but you can't compare WrestleMania to that of All In. All the pro wrestlers across the globe dream of being a part of Mania and main eventing it. It is the biggest ever achievement for any pro wrestler. You just can't say Mania doesn't mean that much to you. I understand you are an integral part of AEW and need to blow the nuts of Tony Khan all the time, but the reality is nothing comes close to WrestleMania ever. And you know the sad part about this whole comment? That is the underlying agenda behind all this, right? Bear with me for a second. Don't get it twisted. This commenter or whoever he is a fucking absolute lobotomite, like an absolute troglodyte, beyond disrespectful piece of shit retard, right? No. Fuck what he's saying about the fact that WrestleMania means more than All In, therefore you have to suck the dick of WWE. Did you not hear what Bryan Danielson said? He didn't say any of that. He said that his reasoning for liking something more than something is because of a personal connection to the event. Had nothing to do with what happened to be the bigger brand. Again, that's when the tribalism, although it's fun, you can never, ever, ever, ever say one side is completely good and the other side is completely bad, because you have morons like this. But the caveat off of it, he isn't wrong about the AEW part. In this particular part, there's a sense of it, but we'll get a little bit deeper, because he's wrong in this sense, but he's not wrong overall. So we'll get a little bit deeper, because I know some people were asking me earlier, why didn't I cover this at the time? And personally, I didn't really feel it was that big of a deal. But here's another post. Bryan Danielson spent several years at the top in WWE, but he believes that WWE is actually a parody of professional wrestling sometimes. While speaking during a StarCast panel, Bryan Danielson explained that he hasn't been involved with AEW's creative process for quite some time, but he believes the shows over the past several months have been outstanding. Danielson says he watches both weekly programs from home and feels that the wrestlers and everyone involved in the creative side are doing an excellent job. And I quote from Bryan Danielson, "So, I haven't had much of anything to do with creative in AEW for a while, but I think the AEW shows for the last several months have just been incredible. You know, I watch the product every week at home, both shows, and I just think that the people, the wrestlers, the people involved in creative, everybody's doing just such a great job." The American Dragon also mentioned that he's never been afraid to be critical of creative processes, citing his time in WWE as an example. Back then, he often felt that certain aspects of the product came off as a parody of wrestling, a sentiment he even included in a book published by WWE. According to Danielson, WWE still feels that way at times. And I quote from Danielson, "So that's like, listen, I'm not afraid to be critical of a creative process or what I see in the sense of, like, okay, maybe even when I was in WWE, I would say, okay, sometimes this feels like a parody of wrestling to me. I wrote that in my book that was put out by WWE. Even now, WWE seems like a parody of wrestling to me at times." And this comes after Danielson confirmed he has recently, because he was asked, this is around the time a couple of days ago when people were pressing him about the whole Yes Chen stuff that he was doing at the All In show when he interfered in the match with Hangman and Jon Moxley. So I'm not sure if there's a bias attached to it or whatever the case may be. Like I said, his own lived experience. But like, a parody of wrestling, Bryan Danielson? What if I were to grant him that, right? What if I were to grant him that, okay, the traditional aspect of WWE typically stems off of character work, right? It typically stems off of promos. It's not just him even stating that, right? You have people within the company and themselves to this very day, like Michael Cole a couple of weeks ago, outright saying that WWE is not wrestling. WWE is purely entertainment. I mean, these guys are actively trying to go for an Academy Award, right? Or some shit like that, or some prestigious award that I can't remember, a daytime Emmy, or I think it was an Emmy if I'm not mistaken. They themselves don't view themselves as wrestling, even though they themselves are wrestling. It's wrestling. I mean, for the longest, before Triple H took over, they were afraid to call themselves wrestlers. You know, they had to be superstars, right? Which is okay. The branding, it is what it is. I will grant that to Bryan Danielson, and I will say that, okay, fine. That's a parody of professional wrestling. What I have a problem with, though, is how do you see the product that AEW puts out, and Bryan Danielson being, you know, a student of the game, a person who I obviously can tell put a lot into his craft, you know, as an in-ring technician, a person who actually uses common sense when he wrestles, a person who is a great, phenomenal psychologist when it comes to in-ring wrestling. I feel like you're using a bit of confirmation bias. So if WWE is a parody of wrestling, which is your prerogative, I'm not saying you're wrong about that, what do you call stapling a man's tongue, stapling a man's head, super kicking with thumbtacks on, and electrocutions and all this other kind of stuff, right? Because even if you want to say all the theatrics that go on in AEW was done by WWE at a certain point in time, more in particular the Attitude Era, you just call that a parody. So how is this company not a parody? And that's not even talking about all the gymnastic routines, the choreographed move sets, the lack of psychology, the thing that you are extremely good at, they lack. Right? So even if you're looking at this from an in-ring perspective, I mean, isn't that a bit of a double standard? One is a parody of wrestling. I will grant you that in its own way. But the other one, I mean, no? Like, huh? Did you watch Anarchy in the Arena? You participated in an Anarchy in the Arena. Huh? A bed of nails, being slammed on a bed of nails, being suplexed on a 2x4, impaled with spikes, stabbing people in the head with scissors multiple times. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Again, his prerogative, his lived experience. I'm only pointing out the things that seem like, okay, if one's one, then the other's the other. But this is the one that puts it over the top for me. This is the one that really, really, really puts it over the top for me. Which again, his prerogative. Gotta keep emphasizing this, because I feel like people are gonna come at this in bad faith and not understand what I'm talking about. No one is saying that he's ungrateful. At least I'm not saying he's ungrateful. It's the underlining agenda that really, really seeps into my mind. Bryan Danielson names his favorite matches and moments from his career in specific categories. So, what Bryan Danielson qualifies as his hardest match was against Kazuchika Okada at AEW Forbidden Door 2023. The match that meant the most to him, obviously, the Swerve match at All In last year, okay? His most underrated match, Zack Sabre Jr., New Japan, New Beginning, last year. His most emotional moment, Jon Moxley at AEW Wrestle Dream last year. That's when you get to the point when you really, 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 really start to see the, bias. And look, I get it. It's not as if WWE doesn't do the exact same practice, right? It's not as if WWE doesn't do the exact same practice. They do. They will go out of their way to not mention you, right? Now, they do it way less now compared to back in the days, but WWE also engages in that same practice. When the most obvious thing is directly in front of your face, they will deliberately go out of their way to not mention it for, optical reasons. I don't know. I don't get it. They'll take people out of the intro that you'll probably see for a split second. They'll take them out of the fucking intro as if anyone cares or as if anyone's going to see it. If anything, you bring more attention to the fact that, you bring more attention to that because you took them out of the fucking intro. So it's not as if WWE is above all this. But again, the hardest match, Kazuchika Okada. Really? I mean, your prerogative, but I would think Kenta in 06, the guy who busted your fucking eardrum. But okay, sure. Okay. Match that meant the most to him. This is the only one that I look at and I say to myself, okay, I completely understand the Swerve stuff. Like you said earlier, his family was in the ring, all that stuff. I get that. Most underrated match against Zack Sabre Jr. last year. I mean, I could name 1,000,001 other great Bryan Danielson matches. I would probably even argue, because I've seen that Zack Sabre Jr. match, I would argue that even the Zack Sabre Jr. match from Wrestle Dream back in 2023 was better, but that's just my opinion. But this is the one that got me the most emotional moment. Moxley. I mean, I get it. I understand. It's his last match. All right. But that's not conclusive as to whether or not that's your last match. You deliberately went out of your way to not mention any WWE moments, Bryan. That emotional part couldn't have gone to WrestleMania. No, like I said, it's not to say anything about being ungrateful. It's not to say that he can't feel a way that he feels. It's just so brutally obvious that he's deliberately going out of his way not to mention WWE, that it feels like he's just cheerleading for AEW. And bear with me, there's nothing wrong with cheering with AEW. There's nothing wrong with that. He's a company man. I actually kind of respect that, to be perfectly honest with you. I just want to be able to keep it consistent with all the AEW marks coming in who will say something along the lines of WWE have guys who are shills. You know what I mean? You see, this whole video is not to necessarily call out Bryan Danielson. It's to call out the AEW fandom as a whole. Because I want you guys to look at this video, and I want you to remember this video the next time you have an AEW fan say something along the lines of the shills who are working for WWE, when you actively see something like this. Maybe he feels that way, maybe he doesn't feel that way. I don't know, but what I can tell you is that he deliberately went out of his way to not mention any of his moments in WWE. No matter how he feels, that's a shill move, yes or no, right? For the people who are going to inevitably ignore the amount of times that I just kept saying over and over again, he is not ungrateful. This is how this man feels. I know you're going to ignore it. I know you're going to still say, well, Devontae, stop telling people how to feel. This is the same people, right? The same people. Ignore the fact they just deliberately ignored what I said. These are the same people who just went after Blake Monroe, the former Mariah May. Literally, she went to NXT and they called her all kinds of names. The same woman who said, hey guys, I've been posting things about WWE going back about 10 years. They called her a cuck. You know, they called her a shill. They called her all kinds of names. You know, when it comes to Bryan Danielson, guys, you can't tell him how to feel. You can't say what he wants to do, blah, 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 blah. But when it's Blake Monroe, oh God, all the opportunities. All the opportunities. You're so ungrateful. You're so ungrateful. The same people who would tell you, you can't say that about Bryan Danielson, they did the same thing to Mariah May. That's all I'm pointing out. That's all I'm pointing out. Always remember, for the people who will call you tribalist, it's all a projection. They don't care in the end of the day. It's all projection. Engage with the tribalism. Ignore the people who are calling you tribalists, because the ones who are calling you tribalists are the biggest tribalists in the world. They only call you a tribalist because that's the only thing that they can actually say at that moment, because they most likely can't defeat a point that you just brought up, or it was just so blatantly, objectively factual that all they can really do is just throw ad hominems, which again is super weird because it's a product. It's an entity. It's not yours. It's not your family. It's not a personal relationship. It's a fucking company. It's a company that, again, I have no problem with people being tribalistic over it, because it's all a game at the end of the day. If you can do it with football, I see no reason as to why you can't do it with professional wrestling. Nothing wrong with that. But just the grandstanding, stop it. The virtue signaling, stop it. You don't mean it. You don't care about it. Just stop it. If Bryan Danielson can outright, without any question, be the world's biggest AEW company man shill, I don't want to hear it about the WWE wrestlers who also engage within the same practice. For the people who are going to state that you guys going after Bryan Danielson and saying that he's ungrateful, tell them to suck your dick, because they did it for months with Blake Monroe. That's all I'm saying. Call me a bad guy, call me a good guy, but also call me a correct guy. As always, my name is Devontae, aka Millennial Smart, and I'll be catching you fine folks later. See you later on tonight for the Dynamite Review. A deuces and a pea ice.